Welcome to My Business Matters, the Michigan Chamber podcast.
Hello, I'm Jim Holcomb, President and CEO of the Michigan Chamber and today's podcast host. We're going to be talking about an issue today that's been on the top of my mind as our country struggles with just fundamental knowledge of civics. As we enter the fast and furious election year, it's going to be all the more front of mind for many people, and that's civic engagement and the business case for supporting it. A warm welcome today to our special guest, Hilary Crow. She's the Vice President for Civics at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, which has done a lot of work studying and analysis on this critical issue. Hilary, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jim. I'm delighted to be here.
Let's just start with some basic kind of background on you and your work that you're doing at the U.S. Chamber.
Sure. We really started digging into civics back in 2018. We started looking at what are some of the long-term threats to America's prosperity. And we're looking at some of the trends of declining support for democracy, declining trust in institutions, increasing levels of polarization. And we decided to really dig in and understand what was, at the root cause of some of these trends we were seeing, and found that a lot of it was tied to a multi-generational decline in civic knowledge, right? People just simply not understanding how our political system is supposed to work, and then sort of in line with that, how to engage at the local level within their communities, within their states to enact positive change where they solve, problems and challenges. And so we worked with the Harvard Business Review at the time and did a white paper making the business case for civics education. And we found that business really wasn't at the table on the conversation of civics, and that there was a huge opportunity for employers of all sizes and across the country to really lean in and to engage and help us elevate civics as a national priority. And that's really where we got started.
Yeah, it's kind of troublesome. The one phrase I took from you is declining support for democracy. Is that, do they not support democracy, or they didn't support what was going on in American politics that supposedly was democracy?
It was definitely related to what was going on in politics. And there was also some of the trends where, as we dug into them, people sort of were getting the feeling like there was a declining sense for or support for democracy, that there was increasing support for socialism, which, once we dug into that a little bit more, also found that, is that really the case, or was it really that people just weren't understanding how the system is supposed to work and how it benefits us, what democracy means versus what socialism means and what those outcomes are? And it was really a lack of knowledge and just, the current system doesn't seem to be working, so let's just, switch to something else.
Yeah, because it is scary how many people are actually pulling back. When we need people to lean in, to be more engaged, to be part of the process, doesn't mean they have to run for office, but be an active citizen, know your rights and responsibilities of citizenship, and how do you better the system. And people, they don't want to get canceled. They don't want somebody tweeting in them. They don't want their neighbor yelling at them. And we've just made it so hard for people to do what used to be it's a basic right, but people saw it as a responsibility. And so many people have walked away from that, I fear.
Yes. And what we also learned around that time was that the reason for the decline in knowledge was because decades ago, we really stopped investing in civic education. So around the time when we started investing in prioritizing STEM, we unfortunately decided to reduce investment in civics in a big way. Even there's been advancements in the last year of investing in civics education, but even currently, for every $67 that's spent per student for STEM, 50 cents is spent per student on civics. And so that sustained deprioritization over decades has had real consequences.
Yeah, 50 cents for the foundation of our whole country and our way of operating here in the United States, and it's worth 50 cents a student.
Right. I think people thought, citizenship, people will just learn by, looking toward their community leaders or their parents, or it's something that people will naturally pick up or adopt. But we've learned that isn't the case, that those fundamentals and understanding how the government is supposed to work and what our roles and responsibilities are as citizens are things that really need to be taught.
Yeah. What do educational testing, what's it tell us about where students are currently in their knowledge base?
So the National the National Assessment of Educational Progress released numbers last year showing that only 20% of 8th graders can pass a civics test. So,
and I'm assuming this isn't SAT level.
No.
Oh, this is probably basic.
This is basic
civics
knowledge. And unfortunately, we've since done some research and polling ourselves of adults to understand what's the current level of civic knowledge for adults in America. And 70% of adults failed the civics quiz that our researchers gave them. 1 in 3 didn't know that there's even 3 branches of government. And there was, these are significant challenges when we think about our long-term competitiveness as a country. And, you were saying you were talking about people that are concerned about, being canceled or getting, negative feedback on social media. I think, unfortunately, those voices have gotten really loud, and the civil voices have backed away and have started to take more of a back seat, but we really need to bring them to the spotlight and to the forefront and find ways to bring these community members and leaders together in a positive way and underscore that that's the norm. The norm is coming together, finding ways to work together across differences.
Absolutely, being collaborative and being practical in our problem-solving approach. And you were talking about the scores of parents or adults that the knowledge they don't have. That's where I learned a lot of my civics. We had in school, but it was around the kitchen table. It was about the lessons they would tell you, and you talk to parents or grandparents, and whether it was a time of an election, and they would talk about voting and the importance of it, and you never give up that right, and always, stand up and try to make your community better. We've just lost that whole sense of passing it down generation to generation.
You mentioning voting reminds me of a report the Reboot Foundation put out last spring. They did some polling, and they asked 13 to 17-year-olds as well as 18 to 24-year-olds if you had to choose between giving up your right to vote or giving up your social media account for a year, which would you choose?
I don't even want to know.
Yeah, more than 60% of both groups said they'd give up their right to vote in order to keep their social media account.
Yeah, which is exactly the premise of why people need to engage. They feel they're disengaging because they feel the government is responsive to them. So the solution isn't don't think about government; it's to think more about it.
Right. Exactly.
So, what are the strategies? How do we change this? What do we do differently? Not only the business community, but just society in general. What are the steps?
So a few years ago, we launched at the U.S. Chamber Foundation the Civic Trust, and we have 3 pillars of focus, which are civics literacy, civics at work, and elevating civics as a national priority. And we really believe that we have to start with knowledge, because in order for people to really be able to engage and understand how they can engage, they have to know the system and how it works and what their roles and responsibilities are. And so we are focused on elevating civic literacy across multiple generations, right? As I mentioned, the deprioritization and investment in civics goes back decades. So we can't only focus on young people today. We have to focus on the adults and the older generations as well. And so we 2 years ago launched the National Civics Bee, which is a civics-based competition for middle school students. So I'm sure people are familiar with the spelling bee or geography bee. So it's similar in nature that we've created a competition focused on civic knowledge. And we piloted that in 5 cities 2 years ago. And now it has spread to 28 states. More than 110 local and state chambers participating across those 28 states. And our goal is to be in all 50 states by 2026, which of course will be America's 250th birthday. And really thinking about laying the groundwork through these local and state chamber partnerships to bring leaders together at the local level, at the community level, in a positive way, where we're reaching young people, but we're also reaching their parents and their families, their educators, their elected officials, and communities at large in a positive, nonpartisan way to really elevate civics and what it means to be a citizen.
Yeah, no, we're so proud of the Michigan Chamber of Commerce through our foundation to collaborate with you to bring that to Michigan, the Civics Bee. And I think what really struck me is it's for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, but it's not just about them. It's about all the people they have a conversation with when they're preparing for their competition, they're talking to a brother, an aunt, an uncle, a mom, a dad, a grandparent, a family friend, somebody, and it's like that pebble in the pond where the pebble's in there and the circles keep going out, that you're impacting so many people. I just think it's tremendous program that you embedded with that.
Thank you. Yes, and we are receiving such tremendous feedback from our chamber partners, which are just critical to the growth of this program, who are telling us, for the first time, we're seeing community members who would never be in the same room together that are coming together to celebrate and be part of the National Civics Bee, which is really wonderful. We're seeing, in states where they have divided leadership on both sides, that they're coming together to support this and to be part of it, which is really impactful, right? That sort of impact that you can't quite measure, but it really has an effect on the community.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit more about the Civics at Work and what's that kind of program of work look like, or what's your goal with that?
Yes. So we know that employers are all over the country, that whether you're a small, mid-size, or large company or employer, there's 160 million people currently in the American workforce. So if we're looking to be able to reach as many adults as possible, partnering with employers is a really great way to do that. And so we are putting together resources and toolkits for employers to engage their employees in small, scalable, easy ways that are a light lift for the employer, but can create real impact for their employees. So we've piloted programs. One is called Civic Time Off, excuse me, which focuses on providing information for employees who want to volunteer to be election poll workers. We are piloting another program over the summer focused on juror education and providing information about what it means to serve on a jury, what that role includes, and how to prepare for that, and why that's an important part of civic engagement as well. And we have another idea that we're still working through on civics ed in the workplace and providing some online learning tools for people to increase their civic knowledge of the basics of how our government works, but also in thinking through civic skills and how those relate to workplace skills and how they can strengthen both. And, things like critical thinking, collaborative teamwork. The workplace is still one of the places where we have to come together with people who have different ideologies, backgrounds, and experiences and expertise, and work together toward a shared objective, shared purpose. We know that we sort of self-select where we live, where our kids go to school. We often are surrounded by people who have very similar ideas and beliefs as we do, but we see the workplace as one of those places where we still come together with people who have different ideas. And so it's a great way to elevate and showcase those skills in a positive way.
Well, and hopefully in the workplace, people already have a relationship. They already trust each other. So hopefully it takes some of the polarization out of the equation, and it just kind of lessens some of the anxiety that somebody may have about discussing an issue or a topic. Where could an adult go if they said, hey, I want to figure out what my civics literacy knowledge is? Is there a website? Is there a quiz they can take? Where do they go to just start the process for themselves?
Sure. We actually have a great civics quiz on our website. So if anybody wants to check out nationalcivicsbee.org, that's an easy website I can tell you, but that'll take you to the website where all of our civic trust work is. So there's a quiz that people can take online and see how they measure up. But I also encourage you that if there's a local or state competition of the National Civics Bee in your area, to go attend. You'll learn a lot. We have an audience track of the competition at those where the audience plays along, and we're collecting all of that data on the back end and seeing how are the adults doing, how are the 6th, 7th, 8th graders on stage doing, and we'll be measuring that data over time. We're actually doing a longitudinal study on the National Civics Bee with Johns Hopkins University to see how we're measuring against our long-term impact goal of really increasing civic knowledge, but also increasing positive civic sentiment within communities.
Which I love, you're measuring it. It's not just, hey, we put out a nice program. It's, is it working? Are we hitting the goals? Are the metrics? Who are we reaching? And then continually improving it and collaborating with other partners to make sure it gets out there. The issue that I just thought of too that you were speaking about, just jury duty. I think a lot of people think of civics or civility only in the political realm, but jury duty is an absolute must for our system to work properly.
Yes.
Now, I may be weird on this, but I love jury duty. I love listening to it. I love the conversation. I was fortunate the jury I served on were just really good-hearted people who saw it as their responsibility. And so I'm hopeful that we can kind of turn some of that around and people understand that if we want our legal system to work right, you have to participate.
Absolutely. And we're seeing, unfortunately, we were talking earlier about people sort of withdrawing from the system and from participation. And we're seeing that across the board, not just in, voting or other forms of civic engagement, but even volunteerism rates are at an all-time low in America. And so we have to reverse that, right? We have to know that our future, the long-term strength of our country, of our communities, of our democracy, it's up to us, right? And if we sit back and we do nothing, things will only get worse. But if we really engage, we lean in, we learn, we come together, then we can create real positive change.
Yeah. If there are business leaders or entrepreneurs listening to the podcast, is there a website that they can go to? How do they get more information? Is it the same website that has the quiz?
I would say email me at civictrust@uschamber.com, and we'd be happy to share resources. It's all on our Civic Trust website, but we are updating and adding a lot more resources around these new Civics at Work programs. But we would love to talk to you, whether you're a chamber, you're your company, your business, whatever the size. We'd love to talk to you about, where you can get started and how we can help that make that easy for you.
Because I think a lot of people do. They want to be engaged, but they don't know how to start. So you're providing that service saying, hey, it's not rocket science. There's one step you take. And what you were alluding to before discussing is the interaction between an employer and employees and that collaborative nature that they're all together, not only in their workplace, but in their community. So hopefully they have a real demonstrated impact.
Absolutely. And we know that, the Edelman Trust Barometer has shown that trust in business is higher than any other institution in America. But even greater than that is people's trust in their own employer is at the highest level. And so there's real opportunity there for employers to engage their employees. And what we've seen so far in the companies that have adopted some of these programs is that there's such a positive response from the employee base to have these opportunities to be learning about these engagement from their employer, that it's taken them even deeper in than they thought maybe before. Well, I don't know if we should go that far, or how is this going to be received? And it's only been positive.
Well, especially if it's nonpartisan and it's about bettering society. It's not about a candidate. It's not even about a specific issue. It's about here's what we owe each other as citizens of this great country.
Absolutely.
So, what's one takeaway that our listeners should take from this conversation? We covered a lot of ground, but what's the one thing, if you hope they just glean one point, what would it be?
I would just underscore what we've talked about in terms of, even though polarization feels, can feel a little bit hopeless and a little overwhelming, the way to combat that is for reasonable people to lean in a civil way and to increase their knowledge, their understanding, and really start to engage deeper with their communities, with their local officials, their elected officials, the community leaders in their area, because that creates such impact that has a national effect, right? Through the National Civics Week and other programs, we see this is a grassroots way to create impact at the local level that has national reach and impact. And so it may seem a little bit concerning to touch something that's related to politics at this time, but now is the time. We cannot wait any longer to get involved.
No, I think well said. We can't wait any longer to get involved. Hilary, thank you so much. You've been very informative. I just really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you to everyone for listening. Learn more about valuable civics initiatives and toolkits at civics.uschamberfoundation.org. Also, you can always check out michamber.com/civicspeak. Tune in to our next episode and subscribe or like to our podcast for easy notifications. Until then, please take a step, improve your civic knowledge, and help those around you.